Hello everyone. Thank you for watching the video. Wishing you all good health and peace. The early morning sunlight cast its golden glow over the lush green vegetable fields. Rows upon rows of lettuce, cauliflower, and kohlrabi stretched endlessly, covering a vast expanse of land. Dieu Han stood still for a moment, taking a deep breath, savoring the earthy scent mixed with the fresh aroma of vegetables. Today, she ventured deeper into the mountain village, determined to buy produce from the villagers and try her hand at selling in the market. She knew that relying solely on catching snails or foraging wouldn't improve her and her child's life. Without hesitation, she stepped toward the vegetable fields and bent down to harvest with her own hands. Each crisp head of lettuce was cut neatly at the base, its thick fresh leaves stacked into a large basket. She carefully lifted the firm, dense cauliflower heads with both hands and placed them in a bamboo crate. She wiped the kohlrabi bulbs clean with a cloth before neatly arranging them. As the sun climbed higher, sweat trickled down her forehead, but she pressed on, determined to gather enough vegetables for her first market trip. Once the baskets were filled to the brim, Dieu Han reached into her pocket and took out her last few coins, placing them carefully into the seller's hand. This money was all she had left from her last snail sale. As she handed it over, she knew she had nothing left. Everything now depended on this batch of produce. The woman counted the money, then glanced at her with a look of sympathy. "Try to sell them all, okay? If it goes well, come back for more next time." Dieu Han smiled, bowed in gratitude, then strapped her child to her chest, hoisted the heavy bamboo basket onto her back, and began the long journey to the market. The weight of the basket seemed to drag her down, but she took steady steps along the rugged red dirt road. In front of her was her child, behind her was their future. The journey from the vegetable field to the market was long, but she had no choice but to walk. Gravel crunched under her feet, and the sun grew harsher with every step, but she silently gritted her teeth and endured it. After what felt like an eternity, the market finally came into view. Dieu Han took a deep breath, scanning the area for a place to sit. She found a small shaded spot, gently set down the basket, dusted off her clothes and adjusted the cloth around her child. Carefully, she arranged the bundles of vegetables in front of her, straightening any bent leaves to make them look as fresh and appealing as possible. She hesitated for a moment before mustering the courage to call out softly, "Fresh vegetables here. Mountain-grown, clean and fresh. Anyone want to buy?" At first, no one paid her any attention. People were too busy with other stalls. Then a middle-aged woman stopped by, picked up a bundle of greens and asked, "Where are these vegetables from?" Dieu Han politely replied, "They're grown in the mountain village, completely fresh and clean." The woman nodded and bought some. Then another person stopped, followed by another. Gradually, her basket emptied faster than she had expected. Dieu Han busily handed out vegetables, collected money and packed orders. The nervousness from earlier faded as she focused on her work. By the time the last bundle was sold, she took a deep breath, feeling an overwhelming sense of relief. She looked down at the money in her hands, eyes stinging with emotion, but her heart was filled with joy. Today, she had truly earned money from her own hard work. This wasn't scavenging. This wasn't begging. This was a fair trade. She labored and she was rewarded. Before leaving the market, she stopped by a small general store and carefully picked out vegetable seeds and a few farming tools. From now on, she would grow her own crops, no longer depending on anyone else. Today was only the first step, but she believed she could do it. And most importantly, she finally had enough money to buy rice and tofu, a proper meal after so many hard days. After a tiring morning selling at the market, Dieu Han clutched the bag of rice, tofu, and seeds tightly in her hands, quickening her pace on the way home. Today she had money, food, and most importantly, faith in herself. As soon as she reached her small hut, she gently laid her child down on the small mat, hurriedly removing the basket of vegetables and the bag of goods from her back. The baby was still sound asleep, rosy-cheeked under a thin blanket. Dieu Han looked at her child and smiled softly before immediately getting to work on cooking their first proper meal in days. She took out the rice and washed it in an old aluminum pot, rubbing the grains together as the cloudy water ran off. Droplets splashed onto her hands, cool and refreshing, bringing both a familiar and foreign feeling. How long had it been since she last cooked a real meal? Once the rice was clean, she poured in fresh water and set the pot on the stove. Next, she opened the package of tofu, carefully cutting it into even squares and neatly arranging them on a banana leaf. As the oil heated in the pan, she used a pair of bamboo chopsticks to gently place each piece of tofu in. The sizzling sound filled the air, and the rich aroma of frying tofu spread throughout the small space, warming her heart. She flipped each piece, watching as they slowly turned golden and crispy. She swallowed hard. Just the sight and smell made her mouth water. She didn't have many seasonings, but just having hot rice and crispy tofu was already a luxury compared to the past few days. While waiting for the tofu to finish cooking, she quickly tidied up the kitchen corner, gathering the dry firewood into a neat pile. When everything was ready, she took the steaming pot of rice off the stove, placed the plate of fried tofu beside it, and then turned to gently pick up her child. The baby stirred, letting out a soft whimper before slowly opening sleepy eyes to gaze up at her mother. Dieu Han gently stroked her child's back and whispered lovingly, "Wake up, my love. Today we have a good meal." She sat on the doorstep of the hut, holding her child in her lap, eating while gazing at the vast blue sky ahead. Each warm bite of rice, each crispy piece of tofu, it all carried the taste of determination and hard work. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt like she had truly built something for their life. The meal was simple, just rice and tofu, but to Dieu Han it was the most delicious meal she had had in a long time. She looked down at her child, who was smiling too, tiny hands waving in the air as if trying to catch the sunlight. Dieu Han smiled back, her eyes filled with warmth and love. After finishing their meal, she held her child close, gently patting their back to lull them to sleep, then sat quietly, gazing out at the empty land in front of the hut. Tomorrow, she would begin tilling the soil, planting the first rows of vegetables with her own hands. She would no longer just buy and resell vegetables. She would grow them, nurture them, and harvest them herself. She reached over, running her fingers over the small bag of seeds beside her, her heart brimming with determination. At dawn, as the sun peeked over the mountain range, Dieu Han was already awake, ready for a long day of labor. Today, she would begin cultivating the empty plot of land behind her hut, her first step toward self-sufficiency, no longer relying on buying vegetables to resell. She sat on the porch, cradling her child in her arms, gently nursing the baby while her determined eyes gazed toward the patch of land in the distance. That would be her garden, the future for both mother and child. Once the baby was asleep, she carefully laid them down on the bed, tucked the blanket snugly around them, then rolled up her sleeves and stepped outside. She placed a conical hat on her head, gripped the handle of her hoe firmly, and walked toward the barren land behind her hut. The ground was dry and covered in thick weeds, but she refused to be discouraged. Taking a deep breath, she channeled all her strength into her arms and struck the earth with her first swing of the hoe. The first strike was stiff. The soil was as hard as stone, but she didn't stop. Each swing became stronger and more confident, beads of sweat forming on her forehead. With every strike, the earth broke apart, and weeds were uprooted. She bent down, gathering the clumps of grass and piling them in a corner to be burned later. Her hands were covered in mud, her nails caked with dirt, but she didn't care. She just kept working tirelessly. She could feel the soil softening under her hoe, as if it was slowly becoming fertile, ready to welcome new seeds. After a while, neat rows of freshly tilled earth stretched before her. The sun climbed higher, drenching her back in sweat, but Dieu Han didn't allow herself to stop. She stepped inside to check on her child. Seeing that the baby was still sleeping peacefully, she went back to work. Beyond planting crops in the soil, she also wanted to build trellises for climbing plants like gourds, pumpkins, and loofahs. She started cutting long bamboo stalks and carried them back to the yard. Each stalk was trimmed and sharpened at one end for easier placement in the ground. She chopped additional crossbars and tied them securely with twine, forming a sturdy frame. Her small hands worked with determination, knotting each tie tightly to ensure the trellis was strong. Each time she secured a bamboo rod, she stepped back to inspect and adjust it. The sun began to set, casting long shadows, but she continued working diligently, perfecting every corner. When everything was finally complete, she stood still, admiring her hard work, a tired but contented smile appearing on her lips. The bamboo trellis was ready. Now all that was left was for the seeds to sprout and climb. With the garden prepared, Dieu Han took out the seed packets she had bought at the market and carefully opened each one. Tiny seeds fell into her palm, like little sparks of hope for the future. She crouched down, digging small holes with her hands, gently placing the seeds into the soil. Each time she covered a seed, she whispered softly, as if entrusting it with her hopes and dreams. "Grow well, grow fast so my child and I can have food to eat." After sowing, she carried a bucket of water and slowly sprinkled it over each row of soil. The water seeped into the earth, trickling through the cracks, cooling the garden. She stood back, hands on her hips, exhaling deeply as she admired the freshly planted rows. The sun was now low in the sky, casting a golden glow over her small garden, filling her heart with happiness. She returned to the hut, picked up her child, and brought them outside to sit under the bamboo trellis. Holding the baby close, she spoke softly about the seeds she had just planted. The baby reached out, tiny fingers brushing against the bamboo strings as if wanting to be part of the work. Dieu Han hugged her child, kissed their forehead gently, and whispered, "I can do this. We will have a good life." The seeds had been sown, but would they grow as she hoped? What challenges would Dieu Han face next? Stay tuned for the next episode to follow her journey through hardship and resilience.
Cuộc đời là một con đường dài, nơi giấc mơ hòa tan thực tại. Buồng bước chân ta bắt xây dần, bức tranh vẽ lên thử thách lớn. Những nỗi đau, niềm vui tạm bợ tạo nên muôn màu sắc cuộc đời. Dù cuộc sống đôi khi thử thách, những đam mê vẫn trực chào cháy. Hãy sống với đam mê cháy bỏng, đừng chờ đợi mà hãy thực hiện những khoảnh khắc quý giá lắm, đừng để thời gian trôi xa. Giữa bộn bề cuộc sống tìm chút bình yên, trong trái tim lặng lẽ nơi còn phiền phức. Giọt sương mai đọng trên lá xanh, đem lại niềm vui cuộc sống vắng tanh. Ánh sáng mặt trời rọi qua mây, dù mưa giông vẫn đang đong đầy. Trong lòng chứa đầy hy vọng, ngày mai sáng tươi chờ đợi ta. Bước đi trên con đường đầy hoa, dẫu khó khăn không lùi bước. Trong tim giữ trọn niềm tin, cuộc sống này mãi đẹp tươi.